All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to the fourth and final session of the StreamTV Growth Summit. My name is Kevin Gray, Event Director for StreamTV and Fierce Video, and I'll be your host for today. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors this afternoon, Friend MTS and Akamai. This afternoon's session is titled Defending OTT Growth, Piracy, Password Sharing, and Beyond. And so you can best prepare yourself for this session, here's a quick schedule of events. From 2 to 2:20 p.m. Eastern, we'll hear from Hub Entertainment's Senior Consultant, David Tice. From 2:20 p.m. to 3:05 p.m. Eastern, we'll have our main panel with speakers from ABS-CBN, Friend MTS, and Akamai. And time permitting, we will follow the panel with a Q&A session. So please submit your questions using the questions and answers tab on the left side of your screen. Okay, now let's go ahead and get things started. David, please go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Tice. I'm with Hub Entertainment Research, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a study that we published back at the end of November, so it's still pretty current, where we looked at privacy and piracy with a specific look at streaming video. So, as we all know, for consumers, piracy and privacy, they have a growing awareness of how many providers are collecting their data, how much data is being collected about each consumer. And they're also hearing about instances where data wasn't very well protected. And that's making consumers a little nervous. And for content providers, they're seeing that there's more risk that their content's going to be pirated onto unauthorized platforms as people become more and more used to streaming. Account sharing could cut into their revenue. And privacy concerns, with people restricting perhaps use of personal data, it could reduce the potential of using addressable ads. So as I mentioned, we did a study it was in the fall of last year, I guess late summer. It was in August, September of last year, where we talked to 2,500 US consumers about their thoughts on privacy and piracy and what they've been doing. So I'm going to run through some of the key takeaways and show you some of the data behind each of those. So first, we're going to talk about privacy. So the first set of takeaways we have here is that what we found was that almost all, 87% of consumers said that they are concerned, either very concerned or somewhat concerned about how their data is being collected and used, and that's consistent across all key demographics. Consumers, when we ask them about tracking on particular devices, a majority of them understand they are being tracked on each of those devices. And the implication here is that, the days of when consumers were sort of nonchalantly conceding their data to the industry is probably over. People are becoming a little less tolerant of that. So to show you some of the data, so just this one slide here where we ask people, how concerned are you about the way your data are collected and used? You can see the red columns, those are all people who are somewhat or very concerned about their data collection. And you can see those red columns are much higher than the green ones below the line where people who are comfortable showed up. So, and it didn't matter whether you're male or female, young or old, high income or low income. It was all very much a high level of concern among consumers. Our next takeaway is that people are willing to share data, some data more than they are willing to share other types of data. So an interesting thing that we found was that when we asked people in general, as I showed you in the previous slide, how concerned they are about their data collection, their data being collected, very high levels of concern. But when you ask them about very specific items, then their concern is somewhat less. So that might be an indication of how we should approach talking to consumers about this. So again, 87% of people were concerned about having their data collected, but when we asked them, at least half of consumers were okay with sharing their age, their gender, their ethnicity, or their zip code. They're okay with sharing what specific channels or shows they're watching. And there's other things that people are, easily or more easily persuaded to share. So the implication there, again, is that people are willing to share some types of data more than others. There's an opportunity for brands to message and educate and increase that trust. So there is some level of trust, obviously, since they're willing to share. How can you increase that and broaden it to include the things that that content creators, content providers, people who place addressable ads need to know? So to follow that up, we have a couple of slides. So here again, people's comfort level with how comfortable they are with sharing data from each kind of device. And you'll see, there's three that I pointed out, gave totals to. So the cable TV box, 40% are comfortable about sharing data coming out of that. 39% are comfortable about sharing data from a smart TV, and 39% are comfortable about sharing data that comes off a streaming media player, such as a Roku or a Fire TV stick. So, not bad levels of concern, but still you'd like to see those in the over half, but it's starting to approach half for those people. And then when we ask people about what specific types of behavioral information that they're willing to share, and as I mentioned, TV channels watched and specific TV programs watched were the two things that people were had the highest levels of comfort with being either somewhat or completely willing to share. At 53 and 54%. Apps they use, websites that they use, somewhat less. You see that on that slide down in the middle, around 35, 39%. So, about almost 2/3 of TV channels or TV programs. And then lastly, when you look through these, what are they least likely to want to share? Their voice, what they search for online, and their location via their smartphone's GPS. So location is still a big bugaboo among consumers in terms of sharing that data. And what's the impact on advertising of these privacy thoughts? Well, when we ask people, ad agencies and social media platforms are among the types of companies that consumers trust the least when it comes to data. So definitely work there to build consumer trust. A second bullet point, most consumers do say that they use ad blocking software. They go ahead, clean out or deny cookies when they use browsers. Of course, cookies are going out of style, but still people are knowledgeable about them and do try to block them now. And they also have, a majority of people have also said they deny permission for data sharing at least once on an app or a website. So people, again, are starting to get somewhat savvy about the way they share their information. So the implication here, we see addressable ads, for several years have been heralded as the savior of TV, but as we can imply from the various information that we've collected, viewers still aren't comfortable with being tracked. They don't believe it serves their interests, and they have adopted methods to block ads and data sharing. So people in the chain of stakeholders in video who want to use addressable ads, definitely need to talk to consumers, try to educate them, try to build that level of trust with people. And I do have one slide here with data applicable to that. And here is where we asked we asked the consumers, how much do consumers benefit when companies collect information for each of these specific purposes? And people are most, over 70% say that identifying suspicious activity among their accounts, they say that benefits consumers a lot or somewhat. That makes sense, right? Help companies develop better products, improves recommendations for me. These are all things that make sense. But when we talk about ads, at the bottom two there, there's a majority, but still it's on the lower of these six things that we looked at. Increases the relevance of ads. Only 57% feel that collecting data increases the relevance of ads, and only 53% say that it benefits consumers if people are collecting data to see if ads work or not. So again, as we often say with our work with our media clients, education with these, it's old hat to us, but it's newer to consumers. How can you make them understand the value proposition of collecting data and make it more palatable to them? So that wraps up the half of my slides I had on privacy. Next, we'll be talking about the key findings for piracy. So first, how much piracy is going on? So what we found, and again, this is self-reported. We do guarantee, we did say people are guaranteed their confidentiality. This won't be, told to the legal authorities or anything. So you have to take it with a little bit of grain of salt, of course. But when we talk to people and ask them, and we net the results together, what we found was that over a third of respondents, or 38% of respondents, say they've ever used pirated or unauthorized video content. But what we found was that only 1 in 4 people, so only about 25%, are active pirates who have actually done some sort of pirating activity in the past 6 months. The implication is that piracy is driven by a minority of consumers. It's of course a concern, but it's not everybody out there doing it. And when we look at specific demos, it's definitely driven by certain demos as well within that group of active pirates. Following up with some data, well, we asked people 3 questions about piracy that we netted together. So the first one we asked was, have you ever knowingly streamed pirated movies or TV shows? And what we found was 32% of all consumers said yes. We asked them if they ever pirated TV network broadcasts, so that they have access to a network feed that they didn't subscribe to regularly. 22% said yes to that. And the third thing that we asked them, we gave them a list of 43 sites that are known for pirated streaming content. And what we found was that 24% of all consumers said they used at least one of the sites on that pirate list. The most common being BitTorrent, which I think we've all heard of, 23 movies, free movies online, and so forth. You can see the list there, that's the top 10. You can see that none of them are really leading or driving this behavior. It's a culmination of many dozens of these pirate sites. The next takeaway is who's doing video pirating. And what we found was that those who have higher levels of pirating are more likely to be male, more likely to be young. They tend to be less affluent, lower household incomes. They also tend to be African American or Hispanic. And they also come from households that have kids under 18 in the house. So again, as I mentioned a couple of slides earlier, the implication is that these people who are most likely to pirate definitely have distinct characteristics that can be used perhaps to tailor initiatives to reduce piracy. So if you know they're young males who are from less affluent homes and they also have other younger kids in the home, there is a way that you can, certainly tailor a message to go along with that. When we asked, just show quickly some of the data, you can see here, not much of a difference by gender, but in the middle, you see the difference by age with younger people under 35. 66% say they pirate versus only 15% of people who said they're 55 to 74. And then we saw that similarly for some of the other demos, such as age, as I mentioned, race or ethnicity, and kids in the household. The next takeaway is what content gets pirated and why. People who stream unauthorized content say they're more likely to be watching movies. People who pirate TV are more likely to say it's because they don't have access to the content through a legal way. People who pirate movies more often do so for convenience, such as not having to go to the theater. And the implication here is that pirating video is not monolithic, both in demographics, as I just mentioned, and also in why people are doing it and what content they're going after. And again, this sort of talks to how does the industry address this when there's not just one big message, you sort of have to break it out into different things. And I'm going to move along here to my another takeaway, since we're getting close on time, and talk about password sharing. So what we found here was that sharing passwords is actually more common for digital books or magazines than for streaming video or audio services. So that's people sharing out their password. On the other hand, people who are using someone else's password are more likely to do so for streaming video. And here we see some of the data. I won't go into the details, but look on the right-hand side here. Basically, when you talk about digital books, digital magazines or newspapers, streaming video, or streaming audio, among all of those, among all consumers, the average is they share one password out with somebody else. And when we look at people who use somebody else's password, again, on the right-hand side here, they're using one password from someone else. So it sort of works out, sharing out one password, using one password from somebody else. And lastly, only have a minute or so left. Pirates are willing to go legal. When we talk to people, active pirates, they say that they would go legal if the right solution existed. 2 in 5, about 40%, said they would use a legal means to get their content of choice, even if it costs more, as long as their reasons for pirating were addressed. So that's a big proportion. And even if it costs as much or less than, it even goes higher. So there are ways to get to these people, just as there were in the 2000s when sharing of audio files was a big issue. And the other thing is, even though people have said they will be addressed, threats of legal crackdown don't appear to be very good at deterring the core pirating population. When we ask them about it, most people ignore warnings and just continue pirating the way that they had been. So that runs me to my 20 minutes. So I apologize for running through some of that quickly. This study is available. If you go to hubresearchllc.com, you can see some more highlights from it and get more information on buying the study if you're interested. Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. Next, I'd like to welcome our main panel with speakers from ABS-CBN, Fringe MTS, and Akamai. Moderating this panel is Steve Hawley, consultant and founder of Advanced Media Strategies, LLC. Steve, over to you.
Hi there, Kevin. First off, can you hear me? Good. Okay. Well, Kevin, first off, let me thank you for inviting us into this panel and into this session. I think we're all going to learn something today. And also, I want to thank the audience for being here. Our theme today is about defending OTT growth against losses due to theft and rights infringement, piracy, in other words. And we have three panelists today, including plus myself. Alicia Lawrence is the AVP of Global Anti-Piracy and Content Security for ABS-CBN, which is a broadcaster from Asia. And for the last 6 years, she's headed a global team of investigators and lawyers handling various brand protection investigations and criminal and civil enforcement around the world. And she's probably forgotten more than I've learned about piracy. So it's great to have her. We also have Brad Parobek. He's the Senior Vice President for Sales in Americas, responsible for leading operations within North America and South America for Friend MTS, which is a provider of content protection services and technology. And Eric Elbaz, who is the Strategic Engagement Manager for Akamai's professional services organization. And he manages and advises Akamai's largest media and broadcast customers globally. So just to open up here, despite this event's growth theme, piracy has got to be one of the few areas in this rapidly evolving space where less is more. This panel discussion is going to provide insights on how you as service and content providers can begin to reduce piracy. So rather than growing, we're all hoping that piracy is on the decline, and we'll try to make that so. So let's start by defining piracy and anti-piracy. Who are the pirates and what's motivating people to do it? We've heard something from David here, but Alicia, maybe you have some insights as a video programmer.
Thank you, Steve. The key to how I define anti-piracy is really the monetization of content, really supporting it, looking at the business folks as our internal clients. And the pirates, I've been at ABS for 8 years, and we've really seen a consistency that the pirates are male, like the speaker before, in their 20s, usually tech background. We've seen all types, including even computer science professors to computer science graduates, as well as SEOs. And why are we doing it? I see two buckets. We see pirates that are looking to make money by having the pirate sites or on different social media platforms where they are getting revenue. But then we have others, which I call the Robin Hood group, that are really just trying to give the content out to all their friends, maybe to feel popular, so on Facebook and so forth. And so what we do is to just terminate them off of those platforms. And they beg us to be back, but we really want to send a message for them. The others, we get the money from them and take them down.
Great. So as technology providers, perhaps Eric, do you have maybe some case studies, or tell us who some of the pirates are that you've experienced with Akamai, and what's motivating them? Anything to add to what Alicia had to say?
Yeah, thank you so much. Can you hear me clearly, just to make sure?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just building on what Alicia said, defining piracy, who are the pirates and what are the motivations? What we see here is we can classify piracy into two primary categories. Commercially motivated. These are the big criminal rings that we see, and that often, are involved in other areas of crime, and see piracy as just another source of monetization, either through advertisements or, as David mentioned before, installing malware on unaware clients to harvest and then sell their information on the dark web. So these are the commercially motivated pirates. Now, I don't like to call them pirates because it has a very soft connotation that we really need as an industry to kind of move away from. These are cyber criminals, they're cyber attackers, and they're hackers. Okay, the extension of piracy is just another form of monetization that they extend in their criminal organizations. That's one form of it. The second form of it is, I'd say, consumer-based motivations and consumer-based circumventions. These are consumers that have social motivations. They want to become more popular. Alicia, I know you've seen this. They have access barriers, which is they love your content, but they cannot see it in the local geography, or it's just too expensive, right? And so it is very important not to, as David said earlier, not to really box piracy as this monolithic issue. There are two main classifications, certainly different motivations, and looking at the motivations allows us and allows our customers to really tailor the response. And so that's really the key message you're going to hear from us around how we tailor the response to prevent, right, protect, to detect, and to enforce piracy, and give that visibility to the industry and to our clients in real time. Now, in terms of a use case, absolutely. I mean, we've talked a lot about video-based attacks and piracy. We'll bring it closer to the use case of live streaming, which is very difficult to detect. The time frame for you to act and mitigate is much shorter than video-based piracy. Although, again, both very important. The use case that we have is a customer who recently streamed a 24-day period event. Very, very high concurrency events. We're talking about millions and millions of concurrent viewers. So you can imagine this is a sporting event, very popular. When the customer came to myself and my team and said, listen, by our own measure, we're seeing about 40% of our content is being pirated, right? That affects our brand, that affects our ability to monetize, and really it affects our ability to sell the rights of this in other geographies. So can you imagine 40% piracy is a massive number. And so what we saw here is over a 24-day period, we came in a couple of weeks before, we did a full analysis on the customer's workflow, end to end, from contribution and acquisition to delivery and to security and to monitoring, really a full holistic approach that Akamai takes to mitigating piracy. And we were very, very quickly able to zero in on the type of threats that this customer had, mitigate them very quickly. But to lend to what Alicia just said earlier, what we saw is that these attackers were extremely agile, extremely technical, and extremely motivated. And so when we blocked one threat very quickly, they reacted just as quickly within a day or so and switched their attack pattern. And so the message that we want to kind of take from that use case is you really need to have this holistic approach. You need to protect your content before it ever gets leaked out. You need to monitor your content to know what's going on in real time. And you really need to lean on the partnerships. Like, there is no single answer here. You need to lean on that partnerships to be able to continually protect and enforce and provide your end users the experience that at the end of the day is the most important thing.
You're on such a roll here, but we should give Brad a chance to weigh in here, because I think with Brad, I know he's familiar with technology that what if the content has escaped normal distribution and legitimate distribution? How do you find that content? And one way is to identify traffic, another way is to identify users. But what about identifying the content? Maybe you can share some insights there, Brad.
Well, absolutely, and thank you all for listening to us. Eric, I think you're right on. Alicia, absolutely, in everything you've said. Piracy, and we call them pirates because, yes, it can be organized crime. It can be a 12-year-old in their room restreaming, not really understanding what they're doing, or they are, and they're monetizing it. And they're pirates. It's wrong. Everybody needs to come together to do something about it. But at the very beginning, you need to protect your content. If it's worth producing, it's worth protecting. And at Friend MTS, we have a full suite of products and technologies that help protect everything and help cut it off at the source when it happens. But I know that we're going to get into those questions, Steve, but I think we call them pirates. It's organized crime, or it's the kid in their bedroom. We all need to come together as a community to stop it and do something about it.
Well, so Eric, you touched on several ways, and when we had our conversation prior to this session, when we were rehearsing, Alicia had a few comments as well. What motivates users, consumers, to view content on pirate sites and fake boxes? I know, Alicia, you were talking about user experience, and there's also trial offers and all kinds of other interesting ways to get at content if you're really motivated to do so. And also, let's talk a little about devices and any preferences there. Alicia, why don't you start?
Well, I think that, first of all, in terms of what motivates consumers, you have to look at the fact that internally you might have business people say that poor sales has to do with piracy. We're always the one that everyone wants to blame, that everything is the fault of piracy. But you have to really then take the time to do some studies and market studies and talk to the consumers to find out. And what I've discovered, I've been at the company 8 years and things have changed since then. But at the beginning, it really was poor user experience, where people the pirate sites were giving them a better user experience. And also the credit card challenge. We distribute our content in 200 countries. And there are many countries where people just, believe it or not, don't have credit cards. They're paid in cash and that's it. And so our whole system is based on either PayPal or a credit card. And so we're trying to come up with ways, but that's really a way that, no one can, they're forced to pirate, so to speak, and go to the pirate sites because of the fact that they don't need a credit card. They can just watch that way. And also the fact that the content itself, someone may just not care for our content. It just may be too niche for them, just too, just not speaking to them. And so it's really effective, again, listening to the and the other, to answer your other question about a case study, both Brad and Eric are right in that, there's just so much, the universe of piracy is incredible. It's what keeps us up at night 24/7, because there's just so many different types that, we're dealing with. If you think of yourself as a content owner as being on an island and you're being attacked on all sides, and that's really what's happening. And what kind of army do you need to protect yourself? And really, I think what's important is to understand is that anti-piracy starts with being, the foundation of it is the law. What is protecting you or your content is intellectual property. It's copyright, it's trademark. I'm an intellectual property lawyer. And so with that, you need to have the marriage of both a really good IP legal team plus the tech, because the tech is your army and it's getting you, but it's also the legal. So the quick little story I'll tell you that I was quite an amazing story was the OTT case study, where it just started with innocently people saying, hey, there are these OTT boxes out there that have our name on it and they're selling our content, but it wasn't ours. And it was all over the world. It was in Australia, it was in Canada, it was in the US, it was in Europe. So we started buying them and just checking them out and getting investigators to see. And it led us to Canada, which led us to China. And being able to work with the Chinese government and me flying out there and using, again, our copyright, which under the Berne Convention, I won't bore you with all the legal details, protects you all over the world. So even though we didn't have copyright registered in China, they respected the fact that we had it in the US. And that is what allowed us to then do enforcement. But I had to meet with the government. I had to convince them that this was a problem, that it was coming out of a factory there. And I'm on LinkedIn if people want to hear the story. It's a long story, but it was quite exciting because in the end, we got a whole team of pirates that were in China put in jail. They were convicted, they went to trial, and it was the first time ever that we were able to get pirates in China, because normally they detain them, but to actually have them arrested and then convicted. So it can happen, miracles can happen, but it really just takes being methodical and having a really great tech team and legal team all over the world to help you.
Well, that underscores the fact, and I think, Eric, you brought that up, you've all brought it up in one way or another already during the session, is it takes a village, you want to call it that, or it takes an ecosystem. Anti-piracy is technical countermeasure. It starts with awareness. There's technical countermeasures. There are non-technical countermeasures that range all the way from law enforcement to even legislation, if you want to take the long view. Think about things like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and the equivalents of that legislation around the world. So Brad, what's been your experience with kind of working with the industry as an ecosystem?
Well, I think it's very interesting. And when you look at the most recent Super Bowl, you might not agree with who won and all of that, but the streaming wars are on. I mean, there were ads during the Super Bowl. People are spending money. They're aware that they can get programming from a plethora of sources just with the flick of a switch on your computer, basically, or on your iPhone or your device. And we're working with the OTT providers and programmers to be able to cut off those illegal streamers at the source. And that's what's really important, where you can real time find that illegal streamer, cut that one streamer off, which will then turn off who knows how many illegal pirate streams around the world. And then we work with the legal teams, as Alicia talked about, to provide forensic evidence against the illegal streamer, the person that is streaming it out of the OTT service. And that's what I really think is important. And you kind of stole my line on it takes a village, Steve, but I like the fact that it's the focal point of what people are talking about, because it certainly takes everybody to do their fair share. Eric has some great stories about what Akamai is doing. Alicia talks about what her ABS-CBN is doing. Friend MTS has the plethora of solutions, and it's a crawl, walk, run scenario. You just can't take it and do it overnight. You have to understand what the problem is. You have to deal with the problem, and then you have to cut it off at the source and have the legal backing to go after the pirates. And I think that's the important message that Alicia talked about when she was talking about going to China or wherever it is, but being able to enforce it. And there's 3 great companies on this call right now that have world experience in doing this.
So if things start with the law and then there are all these countermeasures, what comes in between is the awareness of the problem. And I know, Eric, you've talked about awareness as a big contributing factor. How do you know to combat? How do you know what to combat or how, unless you're aware first? Maybe you have some comments about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, having situational awareness, think of this as an intelligence and counterintelligence type of problem, right? So you first need to know what the problem is. You need to know the scope of it before you can employ the many plethora of services that Stephen talked about, right? And they go hand in hand. It's not one versus the other. One needs to support the other, all the way to the enforcement that Alicia is responsible for. at a very high level with great effect, right? So you really need to build this capability that gives you and your teams, not just your technical teams, your entire chain, the visibility it needs to be able to make decisions, make them with intelligence that is relevant, and do that in real time. Now, I actually wanted to address something that Alicia said earlier, which is the agility of the attacks is important to note out here. A lot of customers love your content and are willing to pay for it. There are those that will never pay for it, right? But the ones that want to pay for it, these are business challenges. And talking about awareness, you're not going to know that, hey, you know what? I have a huge base of piracy in, say, Latin America, but I know that I have plans over the next 12 months to bring out my streaming service. But listen, the pirates beat you to it, and they went to market before you did, right? So you really need that awareness, and you're not going to be able to do that. So I think some of the motivations, some of the solutions is really based on the end user experience. Right? They love my content. I know who they are. I can deliver it quickly, and I can deliver it safely, but I can deliver it quicker and better than the pirates. And at the end of the day, I think the quality of experience is really important. But again, awareness is really something that's going to be the baseline, the fundamental thing that we all need to be able to either address the issue, support protection, but also really come to market a lot quicker. So I think there's a go-to-market issue here that isn't talked about a lot, but is actually a critical piece of this piracy.
So, just transitioning topics a little bit here. So how has the pandemic helped fuel the industry's need to protect content? I hear stories that range the gamut, really. Some say, well, streaming has increased by orders of magnitude, and accordingly, piracy has increased. Others have said, well, the methods the methods have changed. Maybe the degree hasn't. But what's been your experience, Alicia? Have you seen many changes since the pandemic?
Well, yes, we've definitely seen since March the amount of piracy has just gone on, increased exponentially. Definitely because people are at home, they want to be able to watch the content, and they're sharing with everyone. So we've had to increase the external team. And I should share that in terms of, I'm a team of one, anti-piracy team, and I've got a large external team. And to add with what Eric said, that keeps me agile. So that if you think of anti-piracy as a chess game, when they make their move, that way I can bring on someone who has that core strength. And if you just keep people internally all the time, a lot of times they just don't have the technical ability to match the skills of these very important pirates. And one of the other things, to answer your question before, Steve, is the fact that we had a case where the pirate was kept doing the free trial, getting a password, and then actually selling that password out, and then having all these Gmail accounts and new accounts and selling the passwords. So here was a business solution of doing a free trial, which actually caused a very substantial piracy problem, across the United States that people were doing. So we had to catch that and then solve it by stopping the free trial, or analyzing what we could do to protect us doing that, and was it worth it?
Awareness of that is really evolving. Over the past year, I know a year ago the industry was saying, oh yeah, we know that people are going from one trial to the next, and people also shouldn't worry about churn very much. Double digits, OTT, and somebody just wanted
Hey, Steve, we can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Okay, I think he was going to ask the question on, or as we discussed, it's on the free trials and where launching of new services. I think everybody knows that unfortunately the free trials aren't going to go away because all of the companies want people to sample it to get them in, but it's really important to have the right security on those on those um, on those free trials, and making sure that they can't share their passwords, and if they do, being able to cut them off, having the right technology and solutions. Companies are very interested right now, as your company is, Alicia, as we've talked about, on protecting the valuable content and what can be done about it. And so I would just add, make sure you have the right security at the beginning, the right fingerprinting, the right monitoring, the right enforcement, the right enablement to cut subscribers off who are illegally streaming it. And that's the message that I mentioned earlier. If it's worth producing, it's worth stealing, so it's got to be worth protecting. And the all of the solutions at Friend and MTS put you on that crawl, walk, run path. And so we would love to have conversations with everybody. We have a number of white papers out there that are available. Eric talked about the case studies. It was a great example of how long it takes to enforce things and to make things happen. But I would encourage everybody to get on board and start protecting the content. And it's not everybody; it's all the companies involved.
And I think everybody has their own view of the size and scope of the problem. I know Akamai has published some research. Friend MTS, I think, has published some research. And I know, Alicia, you're well aware of the situation in your own company. And we've heard some good data from David previously. So what suggestions do we have relating to piracy and OTT? I mean, we've heard a range of directions that we can go. Situational awareness. How do you know who to be aware of? Alicia, I know you had some comments earlier about what your enemy looks like and how you might be able to recognize them, irrespective of the technical countermeasures you have in place. How do you know that they're the wrong people?
Well, I think the first thing that's really important to do is really keep your investigations to a very small group. Because believe it or not, there could be people within your company that are not necessarily intentionally pirating, but they could be bringing a laptop home and others could be hacking into it and so forth. And so you really just, you just have to be suspicious of everyone and everything until you finally figure this out. So it's best when you're in the middle of, you know that you've got a problem and you've got people within the company wanting updates and so forth. You just have to push back and say, don't. Sorry, I can't tell you anything until I, have got the final answer on this. Because at the end of the day, it could be people within the company who are doing it. And I think the other issue that's really important is that you have to really be, believe it or not, I know this sounds silly, but 3 a.m, I've gotten some names and I'm looking for them on Facebook, and I see that, the information a lot of times is right there in front of us. They've posted pictures, they've said that they bought their house based on the content that they were, offering on YouTube and all the Google AdSense. It's unbelievable that people just sometimes don't realize that, we're looking and we can see that information. So it can be as simply found as that. Who is your enemy as well?
So it sounds like one of the major takeaways here is keep any knowledge that you have of the situation very close to the vest. You don't want to leave breadcrumbs for people. And I know, Eric, you've made some comments about that in the past as well. Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, just I couldn't agree more with what Alicia is saying, because I support Alicia and her team, and I've done that with other companies for a very, very long time. I think one thing to add here is the one key takeaway that I really want to impart on people, as Alicia said, this is a problem that you need to address before it becomes a problem. Right? You need to protect your valuable content, as Brad has said, from the onset. So I'm seeing these conversations when I'm having them with customers at the CISO level, at the C-suite. I haven't seen that before. I would say, like, this is what I'm seeing now, because people are starting to wake up to the fact that A, it's bleeding us, B, it is a real problem that's affecting our ability to monetize, to protect our value. And so if it's one takeaway, you really need to look at this extension of a cyber attack, right, this piracy, as something that you need to address, not as a forethought, but as a planning and an extension to your security posture from the onset. That takes a village. You've heard some of the village people right here. But that is a takeaway. It's an important issue. Start planning for it before it becomes an issue, because by the time it gets to Alicia, it's already a much larger problem than many realize.
Very true. Very true. I want to get down to the last few questions here. We're starting to run low on time. But Alicia, you were nodding your head. I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have something to add to that?
Oh boy, there are other aspects too that, what often can happen is that you will get contacted by the business people, say, this movie or TV show is, it's all over the internet, do something. But then it turns out that this content was acquired. So again, I go back to, putting my lawyer hat on, is that you have to make sure that you have everything in place in terms of the rights to enforce, because Friend and Akamai are fantastic companies, but they can't help you if you don't have the right. So it starts with that. So it even begins. So it's important, the anti-piracy person being a lawyer, to kind of be working with the business people right at the beginning, looking at, what they're acquiring. Do we have the proper rights? If you're doing a co-venture, I work with them as well to make sure that there's the correct language in there, and that allows us, and then registering the copyrights as well. If you want to put the content on Amazon or Netflix, they're going to want to see the copyright registrations that you've got. So there are a lot of, different aspects to this as well.
Piracy certainly is not a simple topic. Again, we're running kind of low on time. I wanted to ask, let's go around the table. What are your predictions for 2021 and beyond as it relates to how the industry will tackle piracy? I'm a little bit of a naysayer, but because it is so complex, and I think that people will see one or two aspects without seeing the entire landscape. What do you all think? Brad, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely. This has been a great session. Appreciate everybody out there. A lot of talk going on in the chat room as well about comments we're making. So I encourage my fellow panelists to check those out, and we can answer those separately. But, the takeaway on the pandemic is the advancement of all of our technologies. Okay, at Friend MTS, we believe we're 1 or 2 or 3 steps ahead of the pirates, but you've got to be nimble. You've got to be quick to react. You've got to listen to what the customer's problems are, or help them identify what their issues are, and being able to solve them in a very quick and fast manner, and very economical. And you need to offer the, in my mind, the crawl, walk, run approach, so they understand, the companies, the OTT providers, and the content producers understand what the problem is. They see how they can do something about it, and at the end, they can protect their revenues, protect their franchise. And the technology advancements from everybody on this, from Akamai, from Friend MTS, will progress, but as will the pirates that are out there. they're trying to get ahead of what we're doing to be able to break our systems and to be able to offer better and quicker and cheaper OTT platform services with potentially thousands of channels on them. But, I believe we're staying ahead of the game. We're working with trusted partners like Akamai to advance our customers' efforts forward. And, it's a 24/7 job, as Alicia has said, and pirates never sleep. So why are we? And just remember, folks, it takes a village. If you're not doing your part, we need to have a conversation.
Good. Thanks, Brad. Eric, did you have any final thoughts? What should people be looking forward to in 2021? Do you see this industry coming together to fight piracy? I certainly hope it does.
Absolutely. So one thing is for sure, more and more people are streaming online. That's not going to stop anytime soon. We're seeing 30, 40% year-over-year growth. That's going to continue. And, as content is popular, so will the problem be, right? But I really am heartened. Discussions I'm seeing, the conversations I'm having, the industry is really waking up, and the adults are actually showing up in the room. I think we're well positioned, but again, make sure you don't buy into, hey, no, this is a set it and forget it issue. You really need to kind of think about it, plan it, as you heard from Alicia and Brad. The expertise is there, the support is there. It's a scary problem when you get a note from someone saying, hey, you have piracy, but know that everyone is dealing with this issue. And so it is really important to reach out, make sure that you're staying ahead of it. We're trying to do our part, but we can't really do it if we're not talking. So I'm seeing signs of it, Stephen. I'm promising signs for certain. No naysayer here.
Well, I think to reflect on Alicia's point earlier, where people keep their information close to the vest and not leave breadcrumbs. I know a year ago I was having conversations with people that were saying that password sharing was the whole problem, and now I'm hearing much more of the ecosystem discussion than I was a year ago. So. I guess I said a minute ago I was a skeptic, but I'm also quite hopeful about it. Alicia, did you have any, well, I hope I can be helpful as well. I'm a consultant, but Alicia, did you have any other thoughts about where things are going to be this year and say this time next year?
Is this the last question, or is there going to be one more?
Kind of a extension. I asked the same question of the others, so I wanted to give you the opportunity. I do want to ask one closing question afterward, and that's what's your one piece of advice? But let me give you the opportunity first.
Well, I think that because we are, I think what Brad was saying that, and Eric, the streaming just keeps increasing. So we have to, just keep going after it. But I think what's important is to find the source. Be wary of, there are all these different companies out there that are created out of this ecosystem that are just doing whack-a-mole for you. And that's not really going to solve the problem. Both Friend and Akamai really are, working as a provider that is finding solutions, and you need to do it quickly. I mean, that's the real, I know when I first started the company, there were people that were working to take it down, but after a week. And the thing is, that's just too late. You've lost millions of dollars if you do that. You've got to really make sure it's our responsibility to take this down and not have it available out there, and not expect that people will morally not do it. That ship has sailed. So, we've got, the key is taking it down so that they will not find it and then be pushed to do the right thing and buy the content and purchase it.
Thanks. Let's. We're just about out of time, or we are out of time. So why don't we do a couple of one-liners here? I'd like each of you to say, if there was one piece of advice, you were stuck in the elevator with someone and they asked you the question, what's the one thing that you advise people of when it comes to anti-piracy? What's the first step they should take? Eric, why don't we start with you, then Brad, then Alicia?
Sure. So the one thing that I really want to impart again is there is no single answer. You really need to look at things holistically, and it's extremely important. And again, reach out for advice, reach out with a lot of the partnerships here. But it's not just a technical issue, right? The most important thing that you really need to keep focused on is your customers and their experience. They love your content. Make sure you're as agile and more agile than the pirates. That's my one giveaway there.
Boy, we missed my floor. That was a long answer. Go ahead, Brad.
Well, let's have the discussion, or let's start the discussion. If it's worth producing, it's worth protecting. You're spending money, don't give it away. Let's have a conversation about protecting your revenue. We've got the technology and the solutions in tens of millions of homes on devices, protecting the most valuable content in the world. Let's have that discussion. Let's start it now.
Okay, thank you. Alicia, closing thought? One piece of advice.
Okay, I'm going to quote Winston Churchill, which is never, never, never give up. Make sure, just like if you had someone in your family who was sick and you needed, you heard a doctor tell you one thing, get 3, 4 opinions and make sure you micromanage. Don't let your outside investigators and lawyers and so forth and tech people do it all. You need to be micromanaging yourself internally and externally, and keep asking the questions. That's the most important thing you need to be doing because things change. People change within a company and outside and the pirates. So you've got to just keep being agile yourself. Great.
Thank you. It's been a great session, and it's great to meet all of you virtually. And of course, I met a couple of you in person, but I look forward to further opportunities for us to interact together. And anyone in the audience, certainly feel free to reach out to any of us. And thanks for your attention, and thanks to Fierce Media, Fierce Markets, for the opportunity for us to speak to our industry. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Steve. And thank you to everybody for attending this afternoon session of StreamTV Growth Summit. On behalf of Fierce Video, that's all we have for today, but I would like to thank all our speakers for participating, as well as this afternoon's sponsors for supporting. Thanks again, and we look forward to having you soon at another event.